I want to take a second glance at things we may have taken for granted. I had this very thought when I was in a city park in the middle of 2020, sitting quite possibly on a bench, pondering our strange existence. I thought, how do we understand the effect nature has on us? And inevitably, after another consideration, a second thought followed. What role do parks serve in the context of a pandemic? Essentially, what does this all mean? For most of my life, a well-situated park has always held the utmost importance. I'm an uncompromising city lover. I've always thrived in the fast-paced, the hustle and bustle, cutting through side streets to dodge busy throwaways only to be spit out into a sea of anonymous faces en masse, all with their own inner lives and pasts and futures, layers and layers of history and architecture and life lived time and time again. I've never minded the noise or the crowds or the overwhelm. Even when I did bemoan the traffic or the commute, there was always a part of me which counted my blessings. As 2020 became the year in which everything seemed to change, I unfolded the limits of my life as I knew it, where I uncovered the pieces of my days and my nights that I previously took for granted, and when I detailed down to the minute instance at every seemingly free choice I made, without a second moment to guess it, it became clear the impact of this year and how radically things had changed. So what was left? The parks were left. And when I'm speaking about parks in this context, I mean a park as a piece of enclosed or contained nature designated to the public, not something like farmland or golf courses. I'm speaking to places where someone's accessibility to it hinges only on their own personal will and nothing else. That's why I'm not talking about gardens or horticulture where there's a payment required to enter. During my time staying isolated at home, I'm constantly reminded of the solace I find in parks and natural places. Where I lived in Amsterdam, parks were, for significant portions of my last year, the only places I could go safely to distance while also accessing a space that was not the inside of my apartment. Though I've always been devout to an urban park life, this year renewed a varied understanding of their purpose and how complex it actually is. What happens to us when we are in nature? Turns out, when I took to reading into this question, there's ample research and disciplines dedicated to these types of inquiries. It reaches back into history, too, in philosophy and poetry and the diverse understandings globally, which widely regard the natural world as sacred. I read an article one morning in the National Geographic about a scientist named David Strayer who studies human attention. He hypothesizes that being in nature allows the prefrontal cortex, the brain's command center, to dial down and rest like an overused muscle. Moreover, he puts forth the argument that our brains aren't tirelessly 3-pound machines, they're easily fatigued, and when we slow down, stop the busy work, and take in the beautiful natural surroundings, not only do we feel restored, but our mental performance improves too. It also referenced a set of experiments in Japan led by Yasufumi Miyazaki. Participants were assigned to either walk in a forest or an urban center. Results showed that those who walked in the forest had significantly lower heart rates and higher heart rate variability, indicating more relaxation and less stress, and reported better moods and less anxiety. Above all, they found that there's just something simply about being in nature that had an effect on stress reduction beyond what simple exercise could do alone. This so intrigued me that I then read quite a bit into the practice of Shinrin-yoku, and I apologize for my pronunciation, otherwise known as forest bathing, which is a traditional Japanese practice of immersing oneself in nature by mindfully using all 5 senses. It became really popular in Japan in the 1980s and led me down an interesting path. Some also call practice similar to this nature therapy. Visiting a park, as a lived experience, it certainly does echo that question, as I do undeniably feel the pull of a city park or natural reserve when I'm under serious duress, or feel restless, and then, once I'm there, mutable and satiated by being around the trees for only an hour or two, among plants and under leaves, both hanging above me and from below, riddled with decay, and I get to inhale a wave of dewy forest air and feel it unfold in my brain like a great blanket. It brings me centerfold. I do exist here, in this space, in this moment, and for that we're briefly connected, to peace or stillness or the earth itself, perhaps all those things at once. From what I had read so far, a new question sprung to mind. What does nature teach me about being with myself? In 2019, when I moved to Amsterdam, it was just winding down from summer, and the city was still shrouded in a mysterious charm. I was in Oss then, near two large parks a half a kilometer away. I took my time, memorizing all the paths and finding places for lounging on a blanket in the grass where you could see the water. And there is water everywhere here. I didn't really know many people. I dreamt as many do when they first arrive in a new city, distracted by potential and opportunity, immersed in the daily grind of overstimulation and the promises of dinners, appointments, work, social gatherings, or rather, cozy Sundays spent at cafes, maybe writing, or traveling to see friends, or have them visit you. Whatever it was, every next turn seemed like a new possibility. And then, as we all know, 2020 dwindled many of these potentials to a close. This love of city living has produced over time a dedicated respect for a well-situated park. For me, their purpose is multifaceted, a place of giving and taking. You can go alone or with friends and expect to find others there doing the same. There are usually dogs running around, or rather walking politely on a lead. And there's sometimes picnics or sports games or the sound of children nearby in the playground. And yet, among all of that going on, I've always loved how parks offer a place of public solitude too. For me, a park is a place that does not ask you to do or to be anything. It's somewhere you can be alone with yourself, and you're among other people being alone with themselves. You can bask in that unique alone and not aloneness. For me, it's simply being. When I read to understand the spiritual lens of urban parks, green spaces are places which are supporting and strengthening one's own self-perception, as well as sense of purpose, and their relationship to others, or relationships to places, and to a larger reality, a place of connection, and paradoxically, also one of disconnection. Of course, when I think of the spirit and nature, my mind goes directly to poetry. And while many Romantic era and naturalist poets come to mind, I can't help but find myself remembering immediately the opening lines to When I Am Among the Trees by Mary Oliver, who seem to capture what being in nature gives us so poignantly. When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locusts, equally the beech, the oaks, and the pines, they give me such hints of gladness. I would say that they save me, and daily. I suppose what parks give me spiritually is a sense of existing in the world. The meaning all comes down to this one place in time where I find myself being present, where my thoughts wander, and I'm breathing fresh air, and my eyes roam over a collection of textures, and all the colors of green and brown and yellow and blue, and I marvel at the fact that it's all made by itself, for itself, in itself. And I think it's not such a novelty, as if it hasn't always been like this, beginning with nature and ending with it too. To try and capture what I'm really getting at, I thought no better than to start with a quote I read in an article which I will link below. Parks, they write, are lungs of the city. They bring life to urban space, allowing people opportunities for play, physical activity, recreation, social interaction, and personal and spiritual growth. I'm privileged to live in a city like Amsterdam, where anywhere you can find yourself, you most likely will find a park nearby, accessible by bike or within walking distance. Growing up in the United States, however, did establish the fact that parks do not necessarily hold the same universal connotations, and nor are they always easily within reach. One summer, home from university, years ago, I worked at an internship at my local Parks and Recreation department, and yes, it was a little bit like the TV show. I learned a lot about how recreational green space fits into the wider fabric of our society, and threading through that are the intricacies of the government influence over their accessibility. I've seen, both in my internship and through experience, the physical and emotional difference of a park in an area that is well-funded and well-maintained versus one without funding and which is neglected. There's consideration and quality and attention to sustainability and design, which, when absent in a park space, can create worse mental health effects and effectively forces the purpose of a park to be redundant. And this is common in highly urbanized area where the dreariness can be exacerbated even further. And in the matter of purely residential enclaves, those zoned out on the fringes of American cities, such as the one that I grew up in, well, they may be leafy and green if I'm lucky, but I'd need unfettered access to a car in order to visit them regularly. When I consider areas facing larger social issues like drug use or crime or poverty, parks may become a ground for non-sanctioned activities. Their symbolism of welcome, of curiosity, or safety becomes warped. And worse yet, the trust between its community can be broken. Just the idea of sunshine in the parks, through the trees, reminds me of a study published last summer by the Public Trust for Land. It analyzed data from 14,000 locations across the United States to understand the availability of parks in various communities. Parks, serving majority low-income households, were 4 times smaller and 4 times more crowded than parks in wealthy neighborhoods. Data showed that communities of color also often lacked the mere existence of access to any park in the vicinity. Detroit is a good example of this, where 78% of the residents are Black, and yet only 6% of the land in the city is designated for parks, compared with a national median of 15%. And there are dozens of examples like this. I read an interview with Blackface's White Spaces author Carolyn Finney, who asked her readers to consider how public spaces are affected by these disparities too. Parks in themselves, places of spiritual wonder, social gatherings, and uniquely individual spaces, aren't experienced or accessed equally. It's important, she writes, to ask which public gets to enjoy these benefits first and foremost, and how we can collectively recreate space for everyone. One of her most captivating quotes, which I think is such a beautiful call to action and empathy and understanding, reads like this: "So many institutions shape the way we consider and have conversations about the environment, park, and public lands. But everybody's story matters. The thing that we all have, which has nothing to do with how much money we have in our pocket or how much education we do or don't have, is a story. We each have a story about who we are. And so for me, it is not an either or, you tell this story or we tell that story. It's about how we hold the complexity of who we are as individuals, as a country. It makes space for nuance and for joy." In the face of disproportionate access to spaces of nature and the racial and cultural history embedded in the collective consciousness of parks and public lands, a topic I've just begun to dip my toes in, one of my first takeaways so far is this: there is no sufficient argument against building, improving, or maintaining parks and green spaces, especially in marginalized communities which are undersupported or underfunded. They can be strong assets if built and maintained in a way that appeals to the benefits of locals who use it and create a sense of community which has an agency to leverage financial and governmental support, and importantly, provide a space which serves everyone and is accessible to all. To sum it up, I think parks serve as a fantastic resource, a sanctuary, and a place where we can improve and grow. I think everyone is entitled to their access, no matter where they live. And I think they deserve to be invested in on every level, including our own individual interactions with parks. Next time you find yourself a spare 30 minutes, go for a brisk walk. Find a tree to stand under, where the ground is easy and soft. Look straight up into the leaves and think about how it feels. Do you feel gigantic or tiny? Is it comforting to not be the only one breathing the same air as you? Consider what time feels like here, how quickly and slowly it passes us by, all at once. In Amsterdam, there are plenty of small corners and places to roam and become lost for a moment. These parks appear like tiny pockets of consciousness tucked throughout the city, a breath of fresh air, a change so natural and unassuming compared to the concrete cities around us. It feels almost jarring at times. And now that our cities seem emptied, halted to a point of stark difference, and we seek the parks and the panacea of relief they offer us, in a way, they become our community living rooms again, during a time where we've all been made to slow down and stay inside as much as possible. And a lot has changed, that's true. But then the trees remain. Winter remains. Surely as the leaves died in the autumn and promised to return in spring, and even when it's cold, the sun may come out and grace us, and it reminds me again of that poem by Mary Oliver, which I will finish now. Around me the trees stir in their leaves and call out, "Stay a while." The light flowers from their branches, and they call again, "It's simple," they say. And you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine. This video was made for you to find it, so thank you for taking a second glance with me. If you made it this far, please tell me, what's your favorite thing to do when you go to a park? We're going to put out regular content very soon. If you think that sounds like a good idea and want to see more, subscribe or let us know in a comment down below.